Hello, my name is Roman Wilcox. I'm 38 years old. I'm a resident here of El Paso and born and raised in El Paso. And I've lived here all my life, all but for about 7.5 years. Um, my parents, my parents are Charlie and Elisa Wilcox. My mom's maiden name is Ortega, and my parents are pretty neat. My mom was a hairdresser for about 40 years, and she actually owned her own hair salon that I grew up in from about 1987 is when she opened up shop until I couldn't even tell you, late 2000s. And my dad is a Vietnam veteran. He was part of the Navy. He was a jet mechanic, and I'm he came back. He became a police officer, and he was a police officer for 26 years. And upon retirement, he moved right into education. So my father was also an urban educator with Socorro District at Socorro High School for about 16 years. He taught criminal justice, and within that time, he went to school. He started out of requirement to get his degree. Um, so I believe he just started with his bachelor's, and he ended up getting two bachelor's degrees and a master's degree, I believe, at like 62 or 63 years old, which is quite impressive because me in school are not the way him in school are. So that's always impressed me about Pop. And my mom is true matriarch of the family. Uh, I just always remember her working her ass off and being available. I don't know how she was available running a business because I run a business now and I just feel so unavailable sometimes to my kids. But I hope they feel the way that I felt. I knew she was busy, I knew she was working, but she was available. And so a lot of that time I grew up in the hair salon, folding towels, answering phones, and listening to dirty, stories of the hairdressers and smoking cigarettes in the back and eating macaroni salad. And so my parents were pretty interesting. Growing up, of course, wasn't perfect. We all had our issues. I was the youngest of four, and I think I came in as the baby and really was just patted and really just soothed through life and had a lot of favor on my side because my older brothers and sisters just watched over me so much, and my parents were uh, just great. They were great. These are good questions. It's gonna get me talking pretty easily. All right. So, how would you define what you do and have done for a living as it relates to food? So, I've been cooking for going on 24 years, and my intention is just to cook in the beginning. It's something that I always wanted as a young person. Uh, Cooking shows, Food Network didn't exist, of course, right? But PBS existed, and on Saturday mornings you could watch cooking shows in the morning, or you can watch your Saturday morning cartoons. And I mean, I would do both, but a lot of times I would favor, Yan Can Cook and The Galloping Gourmet and East Meets West with Ming Tsai and those things, and um, it was just a very normalized thing to just be involved in food watching, cooking, being in the kitchen. Um, I didn't realize that that was like not what every kid just does. Um, so I lost my space. So doing that, I started cooking and very young, but I got involved in a culinary program when I was 15 through Riverside. I think I was like the second or third class of like the first ever culinary program in El Paso. It was like a really pioneering thing. Chef Rick Webb, which is somebody that you might want to talk to. That's who I've been thinking about for you all. He was a pioneer here in the city. He was the first culinary arts instructor in El Paso, and he brought in these kids and whipped us into cooks. It was very unconventional, and but I knew I wanted it. And when I was looking for like extracurricular activity or just something like what are they called? Electives, right? You got to take a certain amount. I was trying to skip PE, chubby kid, and I like video games and I like chips, and I did not like PE, and so I saw that I can get PE credit and I can cook. And it was a food service program at first, is what I saw at the counselor. So it was supposed to be like large setting food service, cafeteria stuff. And it was at the central office. And then I was like, well, yeah, I guess I can do that, you know. And then she goes, well, there is this new program. It's called Culinary Arts. And I was like, yeah, you know, let's do that. So I got into that program and I was sold out from day one. And I just remember Chef Webb having a serious face and rubbing his beard and letting everybody know, like, you know, this is not a game, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, and for me, just because I was a little rebellious, my first instinct was like, oh, this is dumb, you know, but I really wanted to cook. And I just listened and heard him out. And then he just kind of showed his soft underbelly. And I was sold. And so I got into that program. And I think within 2 months, I was cooking. I think he saw something in myself and in my friend Apollo. And Apollo Salazar, which would be another great cook to talk to, he's best known for being at Artabino's Desert Crossing for I don't know how long Apollo's been there. And we started working together at Cafe Central, and we were put in there. And my intention was just to cook. I didn't know my direction. I just knew I wanted to cook, and I wanted to make my money doing that. And I got thrown into El Paso's only fine dining establishment at that moment. That was in 95. And so that really influenced me, like, oh, this is the path we got to go and we got to take. How old were you? I was 15. I was 15 just for a little while. I turned 16. Oh, should I say this? I don't want to bust the old bosses. They're not even there anymore. I think I got paid under the table for a couple months until I turned 16. Apollo was legit. He was like on a work permit. He actually worked to like help support his family. He was pretty amazing. And like we were oil and water, you know, me and him. We just like, we liked each other, but we were so different that we would just argue and complain. He was very serious about this track, and I was a big time party boy that just wanted to cook and have fun. And so like that was a really interesting thing. But we were kids. And we got thrown in there, and I remember we got laughed at the first day we walked in. Not like, you know, terrible, but people chuckled. They thought we were joking when we came in, and the chef had this big smile, and he was kind of a big joker of a guy. And when I came to learn, and he said, "All right, guys, these are cooks," and people kind of were like, "What?" and chuckled, and it was just like a little nerve-wracking. And you just got in there and just started working and doing it. And within 2 weeks, I think we were deemed like the kitchen elves, because we would come in and boop, everything would be done. And we were just, you know, we were young. You just learn the technique and you can run circles around people. And so we made our way in, and it was good. And so after that, that was it. I was sold out. I could do it. I was working online with 40, 50-year-old people, and I was hanging with them. And then after work, I was hanging with them, which was probably not the best thing, because I had a very addictive personality and really got into like partying and drugs at a very young age. So this industry, plus the nightlife of the industry, I mean, they were just like calling to like the best and worst of me. And so that's it. 95, never looked back, right? Along that time, let's see. As it relates to food, and what I've done for a living as it relates to food, basically from then on, everything that I did related to food. It was food industry. I taught, I've done ministry work, I've done nonprofit, like on-site social work type stuff, and it's all been food-based. So that's from the time I was a kid. That's just all I know.
What have you teach? Give us some specifics as to
where I've taught.
Yeah, please.
I started teaching at El Paso Community College in 2005 with the culinary arts program. At that time, the director of the program was Chef Rick Webb, my high school instructor. And that was pretty cool how that worked out. My Maybe we'll get back. There's so much, you guys. Now that like I'm going, I'm like, there's so much. But I had come back to El Paso, and I came back with a wife and a 1.5-year-old daughter, and we had come out of some really great, interesting work that my wife and I were doing together, even at the beginning of our marriage, and it was time to come back, and for me, just to kind of like just figure things out again. And I didn't know where I was going to cook. I figured I was going to come back and cook in 3 different places and never see my family, because you won't get paid more than $8 or $9 here in this town cooking, where I could actually make a living in Arizona. It was where I was at. And so, but it was okay, you know? So we came back, moved into my folks' house, looked for a home. Adriana got herself into school. She was continuing at EPCC, and I could just hear his voice talking, you know, and I had 3 years with this teacher, and he was very influential, and so I just heard his voice, and right away just looked behind, and there he was, you know, in his same chefware pants, same stuff, saying the same stuff to the same people, you know, or to a different crowd of people basically. And so I hunted him down, and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing? Are you here?" And I said, "Yeah, Adriana's she's registered." And he's like, "You need work?" And I said, "Not with you. I don't want to teach. Like, you let me know if there's any kitchen jobs available, you know?" And my wife kind of looked at me, and she's like, "Has he found a job?" And she's like, "No." And she's like, "How long have you guys been here?" And I was like, "Just 3 weeks. I'm going to find something." He's like, "You're not going to find anything." He's like, "Because you have to come teach." And my wife kind of was like, "Yeah, you're going to have to teach." You know what I mean? like that's, you have work waiting for you, you know? And I said, "No, I don't think so, man." And he's like, "Just come, check it out, you know, just... we're building the program. You're coming in at a good time, blah, blah, blah." And that man can talk people. Well, he's a salesman. And so, yeah, I think it was like 4 days later, I was in a chef coat in the classroom. And like, I don't even know if I was shadowing or if I was just thrown into a class. I don't even remember. But I remember that I hated it. It was terrible. It was very intimidating. I would say 80% of the class was older than me. I was like 24, 25. I've never been in a classroom. School, and I just was never a big thing for me. I always try to keep my way out of it. Culinary was a good way to keep myself out of school, because I was busy working, and it just like, so I just never jived with it, right? I'd go home crying, like, because I didn't want to do it. But I knew I had to take care of my family, and I knew like we had to find a home, and I knew it was a real job, that I was going to get paid real money, not, you know, like minimum wage doing fine dining work, and just kind of bit down. And what really helped is that I knew the people, you know, or not, I liked the people, you know, we got along relationally. I started to get to know them, and it brought me comfort, and they would thank me, and they were like, "Gosh, class is great." And so, and I would just say, "Okay." And then I'd be like, "I don't know why," to myself, you know, and it just, you know, you'll see this inadequacy thing pop up here and there. That happens with me a lot. And so it was about 2 years that I like had to grow into it. And then my other job was at Montwood High School, and I was a high school teacher there for, I started 2005 with EPCC in the beginning of their semester. So it was like August, September, right? And then I came in to Montwood, which my dad, I guess, had been in this guy's ear, the director, in my ear, and he called me right before I was about to move and said, "Hey, you know, a position may open up. It may be a week, it may be a year." It was very cryptic. And I'm like, "Okay, like I can't depend on that, you know? And I kind of don't want it, so it's okay." I told him, "I don't want to teach." He's like, "Come on, just teach. You'll like it. It's okay. I'm not a teacher and I'm doing it. It's okay." And I'm like, we're pretty different, me and you, Dad. You know? So I was really against it and just digging in. And I came in as a sub, and what happened is I was replacing a beloved teacher that had cancer, and he passed away. And so they didn't know when it was going to come. And these kids had been without a teacher for almost a full school year. And so they were the class of 2006, the first class, I remember it, but it came in, I started with them November. So September, October, so 2 months I worked at EPCC, started Montwood, and they were just so hungry to learn, and they were young. I was young. They were like my little brothers and sisters. Comfort level just went up, and it made going to teach at night easier. I started becoming a stronger teacher for the college folks through my kids because I could just kind of let loose and not care. And I don't know, I just really was nervous with the college, and I built relationship all the way through with the students at the college and at the high school. And my work started turning from focus of food to like focus on humans and food. And so like the teaching really like made me think differently. I could probably keep going on that question, but we're gonna move on. Let's see. Can you share some food memories from your childhood, from my adolescence? Oh gosh. I wish I had like better stories, but these aren't gonna be. So we're gonna be kind of lame. A lot of food memories from my childhood. Well, so I can remember some cool stuff. I can remember my grandma's capirotada, and it was awesome because I didn't like it. I didn't like a lot of capirotadas, but I liked my grandma's. I can remember her very simple red enchiladas with like too much white onion on it, and they were so good. I can remember her making food for everybody and then like forcing herself to eat like plain wheat bread and peas because she was severely diabetic. And so like I remember her just eating like just boring food while all of us were eating like beans full of manteca and enchiladas. And so I remember that about my grams. And then with my parents, my dad is a cook. Just naturally, he just loved barbecue. And then as I grew up, he always had hogs on a ranch. And so like he would raise them and they would slaughter them and they would have the whole carnitas thing. And nobody was into it in my family except my big brother and him. Everybody else just thought it was a little cruel and a little unusual. But the secret is my dad really like knew what was up because he went through the whole process with that animal, and I could have learned something probably earlier in life had I given that, but I was just too terrified of it. I didn't like the guns. My dad was a cop. He liked to hunt. I didn't like the guns. I didn't like the violence. I didn't like, so it was a hard mix with me and my pop. But I can see all the value of what he did, which is really cool. Let's see. So my dad, barbecue. I remember eating rabbit on Easter. And my sister identifying it, this is a chicken, and I was just kind of like, oh my God, these are the rabbits we had in our backyard, right? Like, oh my God, like we raised these things and they disappeared and I'm eating them. And I was like, I loved them and I ate them, And so like at that point, like I was able to accept that. And it was easier. I was a cook, you guys, just as a little person. And my mom was a pretty good cook. She would just do, of course, classic Mexican dishes were just always in the house, tacos, enchiladas, tortilla soups or albóndigas, caldillo. Caldillo is like my mom's like caldillo. So that was always like ground beef, potatoes. Maybe it was like canned green beans or maybe it was like whatever and just tortilla. So that was a constant and it still is. I can open the door and be like, they're making caldillo or they're making roast. My dad's Sunday roast that he would do in the bag with this like same McCormick and Schmick or whatever seasoning. So those I like really remember those. I really like Mom's shrimp Creole. She made shrimp Creole and it was like one of her fancy things. When she was feeling saucy, she would make that. And then I remember a big shift in our food when my mom opened her hair salon and life got busy and fast food became a very big norm of our family. And so I always think like, what happened to me at 7 years old that I was just like this little skinny kid that all of a sudden I just like ballooned up and I became this chubby kid, right? And well, my mom opened her shop that year. And bless her heart, she fed us pizza and McDonald's and whatever that could be done as fast as it can, and then days off cooked at home, you know, Sunday roast or whatever. Um, and as we got older, things changed, and that standard American diet of processed food just really took over our family. Yeah, and it kind of makes me want to cry because um, it was so innocent. It was so innocent and so well intended, and I think our generation of kids of this age experienced that because this convenient food took over, and it was almost like a good thing to be able to pick up fast food. It was cool and it was acceptable and it was, and we just fell into that and it caused health problems in a lot of us. And to this day, my mom's really overweight and deals with that. And we've all dealt with our weight and stuff. And it's just, it's not the fact that, it changed. Like in no way, like my mom were to hear this right now, she would like go into a puddle of guilt. Okay. And that's not what my intention is. And that it's just, was life, and I found myself falling into those same things with my family. And it was just because it's my comfort, and it's so when you're busy, the comfort, you just go back to those things. So yeah, I became a pudgers like 7 years old on and could not ever lose weight, nor did I ever really want to because I just wasn't that much um, athletically, like I just wasn't that way. I'd rather be playing video games. I hung out with a lot of girls and just, like it was just, I was just not that kid. And so that's a pretty interesting question. So that was childhood. A lot of eating. Adolescence is when it really went that way. And then I have memories of my neighbors that I grew up with from the time we were 3 years old. And our summers consisted of their dad, Mr. Rios, was like a food distributor for like chips. And so we had like unlimited like fire chips and salt and vinegar chips. And we would just eat shit like all summer. And we were total kids that parents were gone working the day, and we would just eat absolute crap. And all my friends stayed skinny though. It was not cool. Not me. Let's see. So memories and experiences that are influential in shaping my relationship towards food. So my relationship towards food has changed in the last, I'd say in the last decade. We're 2019, right? So yeah, about 2010, things really started. I started looking through a different lens and started seeing my irresponsibility as a cook, as an educator, and as an eater all together, and in just the way I treated food. So those memories that were influential, that got that going in me, it all started with me teaching. As I taught, I had to learn. I had to go back to teaching like technique and stuff like that, right? But as you go in and you have to teach more to these kiddos at the high school, and you have to come up, there's no lesson plans for culinary. There was nothing. I was part of like having to shape that. It had gone on many years, just kind of flying by the seat. And I think by now they have a lot more curriculum type based stuff, but I would have to learn and research. And I'm not the researching type. I'm not like, I'm not an academic. I work with my hands, and I learn through cooking, and I learn through watching and playing and being, and notes. I just find a friend that takes good notes, and I take pictures of them and study those. You know what I mean? That's just like who I am, just who I am. So as a teacher, it really stretched me and challenged me. And as a cook, I could work 14 hours. As a teacher, I'd work a 6-7 hour day with 2 conference periods, and I would come home exhausted. and it was just the mental thing, right? So in that time of having to learn, I started looking into food systems. Like Food Inc. That documentary came out at that time, and I started learning how much consumption of animal products, how much fertilizers are in stuff, how much what a monoculture is versus a polyculture, and teaching that to my kids. Because I'm like, okay, I have time with these guys. I can teach them how to tornado a potato all day. I could teach them how to like boil, steam, fry. But once we got that down, what else are we going to learn? And I have 3 years with these kids beginning to end, you know? So we started talking about that type of stuff.
Oh, yeah, I think
So as I was saying, what else do I teach these kids beyond that, right? And a lot of the stuff in the high school was, you see, at the college there was lesson plans. I'd go in, I'd teach my class, I'd leave. Um, at the high school, I had to come up with it, and with the kiddos, they always wanted them competing, and I didn't like the competition. I'm also not competitive. That's why I wasn't in sports, you know. And these these kiddos, I didn't much like them competing, and so we figured out ways. So we would run business, and then we would travel, and that's what we would do. But I would have to teach them other stuff that a lot of time was used for competing in the other teachers, you know. So we would do that. We would watch Food Inc. and we would like I took that, and it comes with the curriculum. So I would go over like a 8 week and take section by section and talk about, you know, the meat industry and what is big business and what is, and then we start talking about stuff, and I didn't even realize there was little government and economics in there. There is, you know, some social studies and just different other areas, and wouldn't you know that I started learning and started taking things in along with the kids. So it was like a learning experience together. And it really started shaping the way I started thinking about food. I wanted to grow a garden. I wanted to see how it went. I remember my dad doing it young, just a little bit, and he'd have fun with it. And he just loved to put Miracle Grow. He still does on everything, Miracle Grow, and his stuff just would get big, and it was very satisfying. And then I learned how terrible Miracle Grow and all that stuff was. But so I wanted to have a hand at it, so I started gardening. I started at my home. At one point I had like 5 gardens going, and we were eating out of our garden every day. And my daughter was plucking green beans, and it was really cool. And it really started getting me to understand that food is not just a product that you put on a plate that has a cost per plate and that has weight and does this and that, and like it just totally is like food is way more important than that, you know. Like I'm teaching these kiddos more than just culinary. They need to like learn a relationship with food. One of my favorite questions with them was what does seasonal food mean to you, you know? And so the responses I would get every time was tamales at Christmas, was, you know, menudo on Sundays, turkey at Thanksgiving, you know. But not one student could tell me that seasonal food meant that we have 4 seasons and certain foods grow in those seasons and you can only have them at that time. And it was an eye-opener for me. They didn't know that you can only have apples at this point, and that, you know, tomatoes, you can't eat them year round. And the ones that come into the grocery store are sprayed with gas so they can turn red. They didn't know any of that. And I didn't know a lot of it either. And it became central to me. That took over the technique. I had to show them that. So I would sneak it in at EPCC. I don't know how appreciated it was, but I would kind of sneak that in. I would just always be talking about where our food came from. And like when we were handling a piece of meat, like what chances of it containing fecal matter on it are. And and just because if you're going to work with this stuff and you're going to use it, then you need to know, right? And so the relationship changed about 2000. I started teaching 2005, 2006. within my 5th year is when I felt strong enough to just kind of start doing my own thing. And yeah, that was about 2010, and I started getting into that stuff. It's really good. Um, kind of foods that have been central to the stages of my life. Fast food, like, is the first one that comes to my mind because it was so accessible. And then being a student at Hanks High School, there was Cholesterol Corner, and we had off-campus lunch. And so it was Wiener Schnitzel, McDonald's, Peter Piper Pizza every single day. You had $3 in your pocket, you had lunch, and go full and be fed, and it just took care of it. And then you go home, and mom's like, coming home late tonight, should I just pick something up? Sure. So like there was times where like 4 or 5 days a week, 2, 3 times a day, fast food was happening in my life, And so that was really central to my adolescence and me being overweight. And along with that came some insecurities. Along with that came just different things, right? I worked young, so thank goodness that moved me a lot. But like I remember I got a hernia very young just because of the lifting stuff, because I didn't have the strength. So like I can look back on these things and just like my food and my diet really influenced a lot of like my health stuff, even as a young person. And then going back even younger, I would say Thanksgiving was huge to me. I was always involved in it when I was young, and then like I took the reins of it by the time I was like 11 or 12. And then I was the one making the turkey, and my mom was helping me cut and chop, and it turned just naturally. So Thanksgiving was a thing for me. The pink stuff is a thing for me, which is one of my mom's desserts that she made at the holidays. It's a total 50s Cool Whip Jello mixture that has cottage cheese and, oh gosh, it sounds so bad. Pineapple and pecans, and yeah, I'm gonna veganize that. Make it yummy. No, it was so good, but it's like, and it still shows up at every, and there's a couple things like that. And then in my present life, plant-based food has literally taken over the scene in my own personal life. And it started with a business. It started with an intention, I first believe. I had an intention to bring the best food that I can possibly give to somebody at a price that they can afford, if not a way to do it so that they can have it. And like, if it was like the only meal that they were going to have in a day, that it had to just be the fullest of yummy nutrition, so you need fiber, you need protein, you need, good carbs and whole grains. And honestly, it all comes out of plant-based food. If you want to start introducing cholesterol and trans fats and stuff like that, we can bring in animal proteins. It's just as simple as that. And so that intention created this plant-based thing within me. And then my business gave me access. There was a lack of access, and a lot of our business is based around food access for people. And I gained access, and now I eat plant-based. I can't say that I live a vegan lifestyle. There's a lot that goes with that. But I definitely try my best to eat vegan all the time, mostly because of how it makes me feel. And along with time, I think there's a compassion that starts building in you that's different. You start looking at living creatures a little differently, whether you want to or not. It kind of just starts making sense. It's that whole like, boop, that woke thing. And it's kind of happening. It's weird. Always have like respected Mother Nature, the environment. I remember cutting Coke cans because I didn't want sea turtles to choke, or not the rings, I remember doing like compost in a coffee can and just really just smelling up my kitchen, like little. So those things were always in me, and it's like they're coming in full force now that I'm eating this way. It's weird. All right. Let's see. What has been central in preparing food in these stages of life? Or who has been central? Oh, okay. Amazing. Good question. Mom and dad, when I was young, My brothers and sisters, they all have things that they taught me how to cook. And my brother's like barbecue pit master. We call each other yin and yang because I'm the veggie guy and he's like meats on everything. And I really, I picked up a lot of that with him. My older sister, I remember her teaching me very young how to make chicken fried rice and blue pancakes, and that was pretty things that I carried with me like for a long time. I remember being in college making blue pancakes, you know. And my next sister, that's closest to my age, she was like, celebration, somebody's coming together. She put food at the front of entertainment and hospitality, to where she like literally had this huge like 10-foot table built in her home, and like hospitality and her nature through food were really close in that matter, and that really influenced me. She helped me make my mom like chicken cream crepes, I remember, when I was like 8, because she just understood that that's how you celebrate somebody and that's how you give your best forward. So like I gained that from a lot just in my family. And then coming into my career, well, Chef Webb was instrumental. And then my second year, Chef Nugent as well. They were not your typical teachers. They were pretty real day-to-day life. You can talk real stuff. They knew stuff about me that like I would have died if my parents found out about me. And they were actually very honoring and respectful of it. And so they were very influential. And then going into Cafe Central, just the crew, I learned so much from the cook to Tony, the grill guy. And I think my biggest stage of influence was my time at Cafe Central and my time at Riverside as a student. Beyond anything else, those first like 15 years to 18 years old was the biggest thing. Not even culinary school in college, not even like becoming a sous chef of a corporate place. It was those years like solidified my cooking career. The rest, I think it's like I had an opportunity to work with the Mustard Seed Cafe and open that spot in this very space. And the volunteers completely switched the game on me. People that were here cooking for other people without any intention but just to help, and had no clue what they were doing but were fully available, really humbled my ass. And so big time influence. And from on out, I mean, there's just so many people. My sous chef Fidel that I had at Mustard Seed, that kid's like, you got somebody and they're better than you, and there's a lot of chefs that will want to like hold that down, and I would just kind of step back and just let him fly. And he taught me so much stuff, so he was a big influencer. And right now my cooks, May and Tony and Mr. Antonio, are they're holding things down, so they're influencing me to be a better business person, so I can step away and to be trustworthy of my food in their hands. So I'm learning all sorts of things. So there's influence everywhere. My babies, my kids, just because they're picky sometimes. So that influences my food. All right. Can you share some unique hands-on experiences of preparing food? What are these foods and dishes? From whom did you learn to make them? So I guess just because it's freshest in my mind, my most unique experiences as of lately have been just finding the fun in vegan food. And that took something that I had been doing for so many years and flipped it on its head and just changed the rules. And so like all those experiences have been fun, and my wife has been with me the whole time with that. Like from just so she's tastes it, she gets it, she speaks the language because she's just been there. She finds things, has the creativity, she gets it, and I guess just starting this business, this One Grub community thing, and just on the ground floor out of like a broke down food truck, and then just doing all this stuff. It's not necessarily the dishes themselves, but the experiences. There was times where I was hanging out in the back of alleys behind El Paso Brewing Company and playing restaurant out of a food truck, starting this thing, and that experience of making that food sticks to me more than the food does. So like one thing about me is that like the food comes and goes. I don't keep menus. As long as I'm in control of a program, I don't have a menu. It's just kind of like my silent rule that I just don't. And we change it. And I want it to be completely seasonal. I want it to be fresh, even if it's something that we're bringing back. I want it to just have its time that week. And so I started that with the mustard seed and continued into my own business and do it now. And I think it's the experience that goes along with it that I'm about. So the food comes and goes. And, we make ahi tuna out of watermelon. That's cool, right? It's neat. We make, funky stuff out of jackfruit. And it's, all this stuff is very trendy right now. And it's a lot of fun and it's good. But it's what's behind it, the experience behind it, and the intention that we're putting forward that has, I'm telling you, it's like becoming less and less about the food and more about the people. Like it's just what it's becoming. And the food just happens to be good. Thank goodness the food is good, and that brings people in. But once they're in with us, it's so much more than that. A lot of the stuff was just trial and error. And talking with other friends that have been living that lifestyle of eating stuff and just like, it's everything's so available now. You can just learn by watching and getting online and reading and stuff. Let's talk about the food, teaching, and community building. How do these connect to One Grub Community Kitchen? So that's it. You just encapsulated it. Rather than community building, though, I would probably like strike that and turn it into community engagement. And the reason I would do that is because I'm not building a community. The community already exists. It's already here. There's beautiful people in the Rio Grande neighborhood. There's beautiful people in the city of El Paso, and it exists. I'm not trying to start something that is already going. I'm just trying to come in and engage with it, and hopefully what we do can bring a little enhancement through the means of positivity. That's it. And through means of like friendship and relationship and food and love. Some hippie stuff, But that's it. The community exists. So I'll tell you about food, I'll tell you about teaching and community engagement. They all connect to One Grub Community because that's exactly what we're standing for. I would also add food access. So with food access, the first intention of that was I wanted to make sure anybody can have a meal, no matter their circumstance. And so in that, when we did this thing with mustard seed and I was cooking there, I had to make veggie heavy food. The first intentions when it first opened was providing healthy food to the community. So I had to start thinking that way. And I was already thinking that way, not necessarily cooking that way, and still busting out triple Whataburgers with cheese, on my break and stuff. So I wasn't fully in that. It's been a transition. And I'm losing track. Let's see. I started making healthier food. And then it turned out like half of the menu was vegan just by like accident. And then people were coming in that were like, oh my gosh, we hear there's vegan food here. Oh my gosh, I heard that some of your stuff is gluten-free. Oh, you have stuff without dairy. And like it was bringing access to a sect of people that not necessarily that they couldn't afford it. It was that they couldn't find it. So they were willing to pay, and they're willing to help somebody that couldn't afford it because they're having their dietary needs met. And so food access went from like feeding the poor, feeding the hungry, to just feeding anybody that can't get food. So then it became just as important for somebody that was gluten intolerant or that had celiac to be able to have a gluten-free choice, or somebody that has like, really bad lactose intolerance, like my baby girl, like my 15-year-old, or, and, people that just are on doing different cleanses and different stuff like that. Anybody that's giving themselves over to like a special diet or something has to put more intention towards food. It becomes difficult. And if you can be a route of support for that, I think it'll become easier for a person, and then it'll enhance wherever they're at in life, and then they'll share it, and then and so um, the food access is central to that, because within that, then you get to know these people, and you get to know why they're eating that way, and then you get to know what happened to them last week, or you get to learn that they're going to be without their partner because they're going to Afghanistan for the year, or you get to, and then all of a sudden the community that's already built, you're engaging with them, right? And so with that, it's just this natural formation. So my time was cut short at the mustard seed. I had 2013 through 2015. My work felt far from done, and it was cut short. And the mission that I had personally of that I just explained just didn't go away. And I couldn't go back to the kitchen, like normal kitchen. I tried. I went, the folks at Artavino's Desert Crossing called me up, and they picked me up to help them out. They didn't even know too much what they were going to do with me, but they wanted to make sure, because they're amazing people, that I can still keep working, and they knew that I could help them. And so 6 months they had me on, and I couldn't click in the kitchen. I would update their invoices and their inventory and stuff, but there was just something about that $50 steak going out to that person that I just couldn't jive with. Didn't sit well with me anymore. So I was kind of ruined, in the fact that I just couldn't do it. So I like cornered myself into this very neat, like niche type of work, my soul just wasn't happy. And I was very blessed, and I was taken care of, and they were great bosses, and everything was right. There was nothing wrong. My soul wasn't in it. So I just was having to pursue with my wife, what's going on here, figure it out. I did this like experimental thing with another church where we were trying to build a community food shed thing. And it was just falling apart, and it just was pointing to I had to do something, and I really didn't want to. There was that whole thing of I can't do it, I'm inadequate. Anytime like a new venture comes, I really don't want to do it. I really don't, and I really push against it, and it like makes me grit my teeth, and then I fall, and then I give in, and then it turns out being pretty good. And so it's what happens. And so I ended up starting this thing with Adriana, and then wouldn't you know, 2 years later, we just ended up where I felt where my work was undone, in the literal space with the garden beds that I had part in taking care of and helping and building, and so here we are, right? Oh gosh. What relationship do you see between the environment and food? How does this connect to One Grub community? It's symbiosis. It's as simple as that. If we don't get involved with where our food comes from, then we've lost it. We've lost the whole point. And that's what's happened to our industry, especially in America, the culinary industry, as a whole. We've lost it. So I don't know. There's more out there that are trying to recapture that. And I don't know that I'm trying to recapture it or trying to make a point or anything like that. All I know is that I've learned too much to look the other way anymore. You know what you know, and you either choose to accept it or you don't. And as a cook, if I'm cutting up 50 pounds of chicken breast and I don't know where the wings are and I don't know where the thighs are, and they're just in some different city, and so that some people can have dinner in one sitting and know that like 50 animals just gave up for that one, seating of a dinner. I don't know, like it's starting to like make sense that that's not okay, and what it is, it's the practices. I don't have a problem with people eating meat. I'm not a meat shamer. I'm not even a vegan, but I do know what goes into that factory farming. I do know, the intensity of just the flat out cruelty, the insincere just the irresponsibility, and that we just turn our head and accept it because it's there. I don't know. It's too much now. So it's symbiotic. And then as far as vegetables go, same thing. We don't know where the kids that don't know what seasonal food is and that don't know what a real tomato tastes like because it's always flushed with gas before they taste it. And it's like, are we really doing our best in our industry? Is it just our job as chefs just put food out there and sell it at a profit? And that's it. It doesn't go beyond that. It doesn't, like I've been doing this too long, and I did that for a lot of years. And it's like, I wasn't going to turn into a chef that cared about the bottom line. It just wasn't in my makeup. And there's no hate towards a chef that is that way, because it's what we are conditioned in this industry to do, yeah, it's everything. What relationship do you see between spirituality and food? So that's a loaded question for me, because I have a background of of a spiritual walk and a spiritual journey, and my spiritual walk and my food have crossed many times over, and even as they both change, they're both symbiotic within each other. So as a very young person, my family, we called ourselves Catholics, I think, and we didn't go to church, and it was like, I didn't even have a grasp of it. The Catholic Church scared me anytime I went into it, and I was young and I was small, and the statues were big and intimidating, and it was very stoic, and it was scary to me the few times that I went to church. And then like when I was like 7 or 8, my sister got involved with like a pretty charismatic Christian church that was like a party that like every time you went, and it was just some like serious hallelujah goodness, and I loved it. It was musical. There was a lot of movement. They gave a lot of attention to kids and taught at their level, and like, boom, I got involved in church, and I felt the Lord very young in my life, and just kept him with me. And I think it was a very awesome thing to just kind of have a spiritual grounding that was separate from my family at such a young age. It was like me and my sister. It was like our little thing, and everybody. And through that, I mean, my sister really influenced to this day, a lot of the spiritual influence in the home. She still brings that influence, and it's just what she has to contribute. And so that was a very interesting relationship, and with Christianity and with different sides there's just different sides of radicalism and conservatism, and as you grow and you change and you start learning different focuses, and maybe what you learned when you were younger doesn't sit with you like how it sits now, and I was always just really involved from the point to where when I went away to college, and like I said, at a young age I got involved in drugs really young. So like at 12 I was smoking pot and partying, but still going to church every Sunday, and still like, and there was always this tension that I had. And it was funny because like that spiritual tension would kind of reel me into a place that just keep me on the tip of danger, and I'd let myself off a little bit and come back in. And then I went to college and just really just let loose, was away from family. I didn't have a church that I was involved in. And it wasn't until I met my girlfriend that became my wife that she just strangely asked about church, and she wasn't involved in church at all or anything. And I'm like, well, we can go to one. I don't know. And then like she really got involved in church, and it did some good things in her life and brought some positivity, and it kind of brought me back involved. And then we got really involved in the church together. Got into leadership. I actually got into seminary school for a year, and through the Vineyard churches, and was doing just leadership projects with young adults. And then my wife and I got involved in this ministry nonprofit called Apartment Life. And it was a very transitional time for us. We were very young. We were only known each other for about 4 months before we got married. And we were both from El Paso. We met in Arizona, and we're both the youngest of four. Both of our dads are Charlies. Her dad's a sheriff, a detective. My dad was a sheriff, a police officer, a detective. So we had all this stuff, and she was young. She was 18. I was 20. We got hitched. Everybody, starts thinking the worst, and it was just I don't know. There was just a blessing on our lives, and I'm grateful for her. 18 years later, here we are. And she, spiritually, there was an awakening in her, and it brought back one in me that there was just always, I managed to just push it down. I would always feel it right before I was going to take heavy drugs at parties. I'd always feel this spirit rumble in me, and I would just ignore it. Bink, and super involved. That Apartment Life Ministry was a nonprofit where you would work in exchange for an apartment. So you had to give 80 hours of service to work with the management. You're known as a cares team. You're part of the management team, and you would do kids clubs and community engagement. And so we had bought a house. No. Yes, we had bought a house. We were super young. We had a baby. I was really getting into my seminary program. My work started not working with me. I lost my job. We heard of this opportunity, and we got hired. And so we had an apartment. We sold our house. Thank goodness, because that was right before the real estate turned in 2008. Was it 2008? Yeah, it was 2008 in Arizona, and it was really bad. So our little house was a big house. We had no business with that house. It was going to blow up like $2,000 more on the payment. So we had ducked out of that, got hired in there. And before we knew it, my wife and I were working together again. We worked together at the very beginning of our relationship when we just got married. She was a hostess and I was a cook at a restaurant. And then we were there doing it again. So she started doing the administrative. She would log all the hours, and it's just building relationship with people. We would give little breakfast as they left to work. And then food was just a natural. New Year's Day, I'd make pozole, and people would come out, and then you end up basically giving a spirit, why are you doing this? And you say, well, this is a spirit, it's a relational evangelism type thing. Well, we're spirit driven. We feel like we just want to, show the love of Christ to people, blah, blah, blah. And at that moment, you get to share that. And that's what that was. And it would happen. My goodness, it would happen. It was pretty amazing. We even started a Bible study and stuff like that. It took everything out of me. I became this skeleton of just spiritually. It was so, when you're pouring yourself out day after day and all your life is just service, I became dry. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't like church. I was mad at church. I didn't want to do that. And it got really just spiritually empty, and just didn't give myself enough time to just recharge myself. Was going too much, and I'm a bit of a workaholic, so that happened. And I was cooking part-time at a retirement center at that time too. And I was really feeling home pulling me back in, which is El Paso, right? And Adriana didn't want to hear nothing about it. But they ended up selling that apartment complex, and they were going to turn into duplexes, and we weren't going to have a place to stay anymore. And that's how we ended up here. And at that point, I came back and just ignored church altogether. And then we got involved in a church, and I've tried, and I've met great people through the way. And then I started teaching. We've been involved in different churches. And what's beautiful is the relationships I've built along the way have been amazing. And I finally came to a point within the last 4 or 5 years where I have just stopped going altogether. But the spiritual sense in me, I feel, is in a whole different place that a church can't hold, a space can't hold. And there's a missional purpose to what I'm doing. And I feel, whether it's God or whatever, you wrap whatever bow that works for you so that you understand, there's something missional and there's something spiritual that is driving me to do what I'm doing. And so it's always been there. But the difference is now is that I'm okay with it. I always felt like there was something wrong that I wasn't going to church, and that was. But again, it's just we're just conditioned to do certain things certain ways, and I've had some very influential pastors that have led me out of the church in a very good way. If you can, if that makes sense, that have said, "Hey, you're fine," and what you're doing and what you're like, it's like you do your journey and you come to church when you want to. You know what I mean? And wouldn't you know, I've been working in churches since 2013. That whole dry area where I've stopped going to church, I've been working in churches. And some of my best friends are pastors. And, you know, but what I do know is that there are other beliefs out there that are beautiful. And, you know, Christianity doesn't allow for that in some areas, some teachings, right? Um, but it's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's just, it doesn't matter. And so I think the true teaching that I could pull away from my years with Christianity and learning about Christ and learning in the Bible is that it really just comes down to just being in relationship with each other and treating each other right and being and I think you can learn that in Buddhism. I think you can learn that in like in whatever path. It's the same path. And so that has really been enlightenment for me. And now that spiritual element comes, but it's a spiritual element of acceptance. It's just so different. And not that I ever wasn't it, because that all that stuff, not accepting people that were different, or, you know, looking at homosexuality as a sin, or I can't even say that with a straight face, because these things are just like, you just grow past that, and you work with people, and you just learn that these rules are, that's not God's heart. Those are rules set by people, you know. And so my spirit teaches me to cook food for people, whoever they are, no matter what they are. And it's a very spiritual thing, and everything, the intention of I want you to eat and I want you to eat well. That's a spirit place for me. You know, I don't know who you are, but you deserve the best meal that I can give you. You know, don't worry if you're not going to be able to find anything next week. Come back next week and we'll have food for you, and it'll be different. That's a spirit place thing for me. You know what I mean? It's all spirit driven, 100%. It's spirit driven, but it's my spirit driven, and I'm not trying to force it on anybody. Like, that's nobody's business unless they want to know. Y'all want to know, so I get to tell you. But out there, that's nobody's business. You know, all they need to know is that they deserve the best meal, and it's coming, you know, from a heart place. And I think I'm okay with that. And I think God's okay with that. The universe is okay with that. And so spirituality and food they're one and the same for me. That's how I share my spirit. That's it's just the same. It's the same. So, in your experience as someone who prepares and consumes food in El Paso, how would you describe the food scene in El Paso? What ways has it changed or is changing? That's an exciting question in 2019. Maybe a couple years ago it wouldn't be too exciting of a question, but it's an exciting question now. I don't consume outside of like 2 restaurants and home and 1 grub these days, just because of my schedule. I'm working like 80 to 90 hours a week. And I go to Viet restaurant on the east side. That's like my 3rd place. That's where I go like when we just can't decide, and when we're hungry and we know we need good veggie food. And they have the best lemongrass tofu and the best, you know, stir fry. And so I know them, and then I know like what my friends are doing, and their food looks beautiful and great on Instagram, but I haven't gotten to taste their stuff too much, you know? So I think about me and Mr. Antonio talk about this a lot, because he looks into food scenes, and he pays attention to that stuff, and he goes out and he tastes, and we talk about it, and I get to kind of live vicariously through him. But there's this movement, and it's not just happening in El Paso, it's happening everywhere, where people, you know, you're hearing about people decolonizing their food, going back to the roots of where their food came from. And darn it, he asked me questions that like make me doubt myself. I hate it, but I love it at the same time. And you know him, you know how that goes. And so there's this exciting thing where people are starting to look beyond just what they learned in culinary school, or beyond what, they're actually going to, like, what did I eat when I was little? What did my grandma make? Why did she make that? Why were the flor de calabaza so good in the quesadillas? Like, what's the big deal with that? They kind of don't taste like much. Why is it so good? There, and I've fallen into this because I want to see the food that made people comfortable and how I can make it in a healthy way that doesn't have any animal products. And so just doing that and like veganizing stuff, like an enchilada or an albondiga soup or just something very simple like that has caused me to go back and look into those things and use those products. So my favorite stuff is going to the local grocery store, where you can find guasontle, where you can find, that type of stuff, and use it and have fun with it, and nopales, and those are the things that are just common to our area and that are just indigenous foods. And I'm like doing that on accident. And then I realized that this is a thing going on. There's chefs around here that are really focusing on that. And they're doing these beautiful moles, and they're making, they're importing tortillas from, or corn from Mexico, and making, fresh tortillas. And you're watching this movement happen here, and you're seeing it happen in LA a lot. And El Paso, it's cool to see El Paso be on that first wave, because usually we're not on that first wave, right? We're usually a couple, decades out or a little behind. But like plant-based and vegan food, and this going back to your rootsy type food, we're right in line with that, and I think that we have some of the most innovative, creative people here, that it feeds me. It gives me inspiration, makes me think, and it gives me a challenge. Like, I got to do something good. Look at what they just did. I got to put something out good next week, So those are the shifts that you're definitely seeing. And the biggest shift is in the consumer, I feel. I feel like the people of our city are ready to have more indigenous, culturally specific food that makes sense, that tells a story. And I think they're also ready to have food that's not going to kill them, because now we're watching our parents and our grandparents and our loved ones just continuously die of heart disease and diabetes. What is it? 1 in 3 families, or 1 in 3 in every family has it, and it's just getting worse, childhood obesity, and all those issues, they take place right in our city. Also, the lack of access. The only grocery store that was in this walking distance of an area is gone. It was a Vista Market, and it lasted this long. And now, people got to pay $4 for a gallon of milk, $5 for eggs at this little bodega. And, but they can get Little Debbie snack cakes for 75 cents, right? And if you got to feed, 10 people in your house, what are you going to get? You may get the milk, but you'll get 2 packs of those Little Debbie's, because it's going to stretch, and it's sweet and it's fun, and it's, and that happens in our community. It happens in other communities. I had an opportunity to take a road trip when I was doing this church project, and I traveled 5,500 miles in 8 days and started and went towards Dallas, and just went all the way up the East Coast. We hit Alabama, went to Kentucky, to Boston. I can't even remember, so many places. And we were looking for urban gardens, community cafes, and just learning. And yeah, just like South Dallas, man, people that are living in the tents underneath the highways, and you think that like that's rough, and then you go down and you go into these neighborhoods where people are living there, but it's just, there's nothing for them to eat. There's nothing. It's even those that have homes don't have food, and it's just, the lack of access is everywhere. And so 25% of our city is a food desert, where you can't walk to a local food and local grocery thing. So people are ready to change that. Our city is ready. And I think there's a generation of cooks that are looking at food a little differently and saying, hey, this stuff that we've been doing all these years, needs to change a little bit. Like this uniformity in food. What's the cost of that? Of making sure that everybody has the same size filet of tenderloin, like how many animals in one night, went just so that one piece everybody could have it. What's the cost of that? So you see that whole head to tail movement, right, that started some time ago, and all that has to do, that's indigenous cooking, right? Like when animals were slaughtered, they used from the hoof to the tail, everything was used, right? And so there's just this big waste, and there's this big massive just focus on the food industry. And what's beautiful is that we are a little city and we all know each other, but now because of access, we can have the same information that these big bustling cities have. So we can have it's like having our cake and eating it too. We can stay small and stay local and close, but be aware on a higher level and make differences, and cooks are coming through and doing that. And so I think that's what's happening right now. Let's see. As a chef, what role do you feel, think, and know that food plays in terms of communicating people's history, people's culture, and people's connection of a place? Oh, well, that's a good transition, right? We kind of talked about that. I didn't realize. So I'll tell you something I keep talking about Antonio because he's just like the closest cook to me these days. But I'll tell you something. I've known this guy for 3 months, and he's in his 60s, but we've been cooking the same amount of time. He's been cooking about 26 years. I've been cooking about 24. So he started late, but his experience really mirrors mine in that he's cooked in some really like spiritual settings and has done a lot with women in the kitchen and different stuff like that. And then he has this academic perspective, and he really looks into like culture and history of stuff. And that guy is opening my eyes to how what we eat normally, where the influence comes from, and how we've let things go astray, and because of that, certain things fall apart. And like I always felt that, but he's been able to literate it for me, and so now it's really, I'm seeing the connection of people and food in a whole different light, and he's got a lot to contribute to that. I really want to thank him for that. And it's a murky place for me because I'm cooking different than what my ancestors cooked with, or that my culture cooked with. Like but I'm keeping those things. So some can see that as disrespectful. Some can see that as blasphemous. Some can see that, but what I really have a heart to do is just respect there's certain things that you respect the traditions of it, but it's like, hey, but we don't live in the world we did back then, and things have changed. So we have to adjust, and we have to be responsible to our environment. Like when that barbacoa was made, that was something that these people raised, they slaughtered, and they used everything. And that was like part of it. That's not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing. We're calling up Quintero's Meat Company and getting the amount that we want, and it's done without thinking about the whole process that comes to the front. So rather than me just being okay with that, I'm not okay with it anymore. And so I will cook differently, but I will keep to the traditions that I've learned. And I will also jump into, learning traditions of other cultures and try to be as respectful as I can with it, just because I just want to make good food, and it causes me to do that. Let's see. What does food mean to you, and what should it mean to all of us? Obviously, it means a lot. And I forget how much it means to me sometimes because you're not asked in this type of setting. So this has been a really good little reminder for me on the influence of food and what it means. It just, I would say food means culture. Food means sustenance, of course. But it also, to me, food means responsibility. It's been a lot of years where I didn't realize that I had this responsibility in doing what I was doing. And I was either contributing to a machine that wasn't working or contributing to something positive. cooks are people of influence. I didn't know. I didn't know. But like when a cook talks about food, people want to hear. People want to learn from cooks. People care to know why they did what they did. And so food is responsibility. And it was a responsibility and a burden that I didn't know, you know, when I was making goat cheese stuffed portobellos at Cafe Central. Like it's just I was just making fun, fancy food and trying to make stuff cool and impress other cooks. And, you know, there's so much more than that. You know, this thing that sustains us has been disrespected in our nation. And it starts with us because we're the pros, right? We're the food pros. And the farmers are the food pros. And it starts with us. And so that comes with responsibility. So food has given me a burden of responsibility that I happily take on. And so because of that, I want to grow it. I want to teach people how to grow it. I want to cook with it. I want to teach people how to cook with it. I want to bring people together around it so that we can learn about other important things from it. You know, it's responsibility. It is. And it should mean the same thing to all of us because collectively, if we all took on that responsibility, there would be drastic change. Drastic change. What else? So I think that this has just been like a learning experience for me, guys. So thank you for even considering me. I deal with this thing of just not being worthy of an opinion. Like I don't know, I have this weird thing. So like I have this rush of emotions when I'm asked to do this kind of stuff. It's like excitement, but it's nerves, but it's like who's going to want to hear this, you know? But when it comes down to it, food has been a really big part of my life, and it makes me happy to be able to share and to tell people how responsible we need to be about what we're putting in my plate, you know? I used to be 265 pounds, guys. And I was like, I had really, really bad health. I had high cholesterol. I was pre-diabetic, and my kids were in their infancy, you know, and I wasn't being responsible with something as simple as food. So just taking that responsibility and doing something about it has brought change in my life and in my kids' lives. You know, and just watching my kids make better choices. And now my daughter's like, my 15-year-old's like difficult for my family to take to eat because she's chosen to eat plant-based from now on her own. She really was against it. And on her own, she's chosen that. And her stick-to-itiveness is like causing me to eat better. Like I'm watching this young person take responsibility. There's no way I can't either. Right. And not that, you know, going vegan is the only way to be responsible about your food. It's just my reality. You know, again, I'm just not trying to impress that on anybody. It's just where I've come, you know? And so like, I don't know. I think that's all I have. We could go on, but I'm just grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful story.